Today we are going to continue looking at solving inequalities, and we're going to focus on inequalities that require multiple steps. You should see a lot of commonalities between this and what we did in chapter 2 today, keeping in mind that really the only difference between solving an inequality and solving an equation is that when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip your inequality sign. So if we look at this first example, we are trying to solve for our variable a here. So if we are going to solve for a, we have to get a by itself. So to do that, we are going to need to subtract 7 on both sides. So these 7s will cancel out. 19 minus 7 is going to give us 12. So 12 is greater than 6a. And then we need to divide both sides of the inequality by 6. Because that number that I'm dividing by is a positive number, I do not need to flip the inequality symbol. 12 divided by 6 is 2, so I can say 2 is greater than a. But if I want to write that the other way with my variable coming first, remember I can switch a and 2, but I also have to flip over my inequality symbol. So I would be saying that a is less than 2. Moving on to our next example here, we have another inequality that we want to look at solving. In this inequality, again, a review from what you did yesterday, our variable that we're trying to isolate is n. So we are going to start by adding 23 to both sides. You always remove anything held on by addition or subtraction first. So these 23s will cancel out. That means that I am left with negative 5n is greater than or equal to 15. So my next step to get n by itself is to divide by negative 5. Now, when you divide by a negative, that is when you need to flip your inequality symbol. So n is now by itself. We need to flip our inequality symbol over, and 15 divided by negative 5 is negative 3. So our answer that you see here is n is less than or equal to negative 3. In our next example, you are going to notice that we have parentheses on the left-hand side. So just like we did when we were solving equations, when we see those parentheses, we need to distribute the number that is outside. So we are going to distribute that 2 to both of the pieces inside of the parenthesis. So 4p is not affected, but 2 times p is going to give us plus 2p, and 2 times 7 is going to give us plus 14, and then we have less than or equal to 8. Now over here on the left-hand side, I have 4p and positive 2p. Those would be like terms. So I need to go ahead and combine those just like we did with equations. So that gives me 6p plus 14 is less than or equal to 8. And now this is going to solve just like you solved yesterday and solved back in chapter 2. So I'm going to remove the 14 first because it's held on by addition. So subtract 14 from both sides. These will cancel, meaning that I have 6p is less than or equal to negative 6. And then I'm going to divide by 6 on both sides of the inequality. When I divide by 6, that number that I'm dividing by is positive, so that does not cause me to flip the inequality symbol. So my inequality would be P is less than or equal to -1. Moving on to the next example, we have this one. Much like the last one, we see a parenthesis in there, meaning we're going to need to distribute. This time, that number that we are distributing there is the -2. So you have to make sure that the sign gets distributed with it. So when we distribute, we still have 15 is less than 5 because that part was already there. But now we have -2 times 4m will become -8m. And -2 times 7 will become -14. So now on the right-hand side of the equation, I have like terms. +5 and -14 are like terms. So when I combine those, I have 15 is less than -8m minus 9. And now we're back to a point just like yesterday where we need to isolate our variable. So we're going to add 9 because it was being held on by subtraction to both sides. So this will cancel out. 15 plus 9 is going to give us 24. So 24 is less than -8m. And now I need to divide by -8 on both sides of the inequality. So the -8s on the right-hand side are going to cancel out. 24 divided by -8 is -3. So -3 is less than m, which I can rewrite that as m is greater than -3, so that our variable comes first. Moving on to our next example, I can see in this example that I do not have any parentheses, but I do in this case have variables on both the left side and the right side. Just like when we were solving equations, we need to collect all of those variables on one side. So I am going to start by subtracting 4k on both sides of the inequality. So the 4k's on the right side will cancel each other out. 6k minus 4k is 2k. So 2k minus 15 is less than or equal to 11. And now again, we're back to a place just like yesterday. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides. The 15s on the left will cancel out. So 2k is less than or equal to 26. And then I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. So we will see these 2's on the left-hand side cancel out, meaning that we can say that k is less than or equal to 13. We did not need to flip the inequality symbol because the number we divided by was positive. All right, in our next example here, not only do we see variables showing up on both the left and the right-hand side, we also see here that we have distribution, those parentheses occurring on both sides as well. So we are going to start with the distribution. So I'm going to distribute -3 to both of these over here on the left. So -3 times 4 is going to give me -12. -3 times -n is going to give me a positive 3n, and that is greater than. And then on the right-hand side, I need to distribute this positive 4 to both of these. So 4 times 2n is 8n, and 4 times 1 is positive 4. So now I need to work to get all of my n's together. So since I know that I really want the n's to be on the left-hand side when I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8n from both sides. So when I do that, these on the right-hand side are going to cancel out. So I can say that negative 12, 3n minus 8n would be negative 5n, is greater than positive 4. Now, again, we're back to a place like last night. So I need to remove anything from the n held on by addition or subtraction. So that would be this negative 12. So I need to add 12 to both sides. The 12s then will cancel on the left-hand side, meaning that we are left with negative 5n is greater than 16. And then our last step is going to divide both sides by negative 5. These negative 5s will cancel. Now, since we divided by a negative, that means we're going to need to flip over our inequality symbol. So this is going to become less than. 16 is not evenly divisible by 5, and 16 over 5 does not reduce. So I'm just going to leave that as negative 16 fifths. If you wanted to turn it into a decimal, you could. It would be negative 3.2. So this would be another option for an answer that would be acceptable on a test. All right, so one more set of examples here, and then this will be it. So on these, we are going to work to set up an inequality and then solve that inequality. So for G, it says 1/8 of a number decreased by 5 is at least 30. So if I let n represent whatever a number is in this case, then that means when I have 1/8 of a number, that's going to be 1/8 times my number, so times n, decreased by 5, so decreased by means to subtract, so minus 5, is at least 30. So at least means it has to be 30 or more. So we want it to be greater than or equal to 30. So now I have this inequality that I need to solve. So to solve this, I am going to add 5 to both sides. So the 5s on the left are going to cancel out, meaning that I have 1/8 n is greater than or equal to 35. Now, to get rid of that 1/8, if you recall from chapter 2, when we want to get rid of a fraction, we multiply by its reciprocal. So I'm going to be multiplying by 8 over 1 on both sides, which 8 over 1 is technically just 8. So when I do that, over here on the left, these will cancel, meaning that I'm left with just n is greater than or equal to, and 35 times 8 is going to give you 280. All right, then we have this last one down here to take a look at. So if we look at H here, it says Keith weighs 200 pounds. He wants to weigh less than 175 pounds. If he can lose 2 pounds per week on a certain diet, how long should he stay on this diet to reach his goal? So the first thing we have to figure out is what our variable is. Remember, a variable is something that's a number, but we don't know the number. So in this case, we don't know how long he is going to need to stay on this diet, but we do know that he's measuring how long in weeks. So I'm going to say we're going to let our variable be W equals number of weeks. So Keith currently weighs 200 pounds, and he's wanting to lose weight. So he can lose 2 pounds per week. So if we're losing, then we're subtracting or decreasing. And 2 per week would be 2 times the number of weeks that you're on the diet. What we know is he wants this number to be less than 175 pounds. So this is our inequality to represent the situation, and now we need to solve it. So to get W by itself, I'm going to subtract 200 from both sides. So when I do that, these 200s cancel, and I can say that negative 2W is less than negative 25. And then I need to divide both sides by negative 2 to finish getting W by itself. When I divide by a negative, I have to flip my inequality symbol. So W, flip your inequality symbol, is greater than. Now in this case, 25 is not evenly divisible by 2. We do know that a negative divided by a negative is going to give us a positive, which makes sense for a number of weeks. But if we turn this into a decimal, this would be 12.5. So that's probably our best representation in this case. So Keith is going to need to diet for about 12 and a half weeks to reach his goal.